Hello, my name is Mark Anthony Santana. Today I will be presenting the effects likely caused by BPA in the Atlantic. There was a BPA leak at Corpus Christi Bay, Texas. BPA, which does stand for bisphenol A, is xenoestrogen. For those who do not know what a xenoestrogen is, that means it binds to estrogen receptors and induce estrogenic effects. Now, BPA is typically found in most common plastics, and in this study it is found in the sediment. And this is concerning because the Atlantic croaker, the study fish, is a bottom feeder. Sediment, we can see that at the control site there is minimal to no BPA. However, contaminated site, there is a clear sign of elevation, which does typically average to about 35 picograms over kilogram, which is concerning because the BPA limit of 10. Now, looking at the in females in the control site, you can see that it does average about 30 centimeters. However, at the BPA site, it has started to decrease to around 28. Side that this is being decreased. Now looking at, see that it is smaller than the fish, the female fish. However, at the contaminant, it has also started to decrease. Both sites, the males and females, are starting to decrease in length. Now, typically length would correlate with weight. Female weight, which does average around 600 grams, compared to contaminated, which does not pass 500 grams and averages about 450 grams per se. Clear sign of decretion. However, in men, see that their average is about 500 grams, while at the contaminated side, there is also another clear sign of decretion, meaning that in both length and weight have been decreased. Now, this would typically affect the GSI. Now, looking at GSI, for those who do not know what GSI is a gonatosomatic index, which is typically weight over the body weight. Now, looking at the control site, you can see the natural elevation, which is the preparation for spawning season. This would help, the GSI would help determine reproductive health. Now, looking at the GSI in the contaminated site, you can see a clear, constant elevation of ovary production in females, which is concerning because, like I've said, the control site shows a natural spawning season and said production of ovaries, and at the control site, it is severely passes it and is constantly elevated. While in you can see the natural production of testes in the control site, while in the site, the testes are not being developed fast enough and are not being ready at spawning season. Now, looking at HSI, those who do not know what HSI is considered hepatosomatic index, which is typically over body weight. Now, looking at the control site, you can tell for females, their liver averages around 10, which would typically correlate for their gonads. However, at the contaminated site is a clear sign of elevation, and this could possibly help determine its health in said fish. Now, looking at males, however, you can see that HSI's liver, male liver in HSI is not that big, while the contaminated site is also elevated, extremely elevated. Important to study the health of the fish because they are having the hepatic site develop more estradiol, which is concerning. Now, looking at the gonad levels in males, there is minimal gonad BPA, which would be good. However, at the female site, the BPA is being heavily accumulated in females. Now, looking at, like I said, heavily elevated. Now, looking at the brain BPA in Atlantic croakers, the male is bioaccumulating a lot of BPA. The females is surpassing said bioaccumulation as absorbing more into their system. That females have a clear sign of elevation in brain and gonadal BPA levels have bioaccumulated more than males. Growth and reproduction with BPA is important because BPA does affect endocrine and reproduction. It can implicate and regulation on environments. Looking at estradiol, which is key for said females. Estrogen in the natural site and the control site shows the natural elevation and natural site for and production for spawning season, which is typically in October. Now, the contaminated site, it does not produce little to no estrogen, and it's not ready for spawning season, which could be a concern because BPA is a xenoestrogen, meaning that these female fish, as seen in previous slides, is absorbing said BPA and is using it as estrogen. So that is why said contaminated site is lowered. Now looking at male estrogen, which is very minimal because yes, males do have estrogen, but it's not used. Looking at the estrogen here, it is stable. However, at the contaminated site, it is elevated. Showing this clear sign of elevation has never stabled, meaning it's constantly varied, is quite concerning because something is going on and could possibly affect vitellogenesis. For those who do not know what vitellogenesis is, the simplest way to describe vitellogenesis is that gonadotropins would go and gonads would help to produce estradiol, and said estradiol would help and to produce and the liver to the organ. Now, looking at estradiol and vitellogenin, you can see here in vitellogenin the natural site for females, also that peak for the yolk precursors is a peak for spawning season. Vitellogenin at the contaminated site does not have that peak. Vitellogenin is considered a yolk precursor in the liver, which is very important and is a nutrient for the embryo. Now, this is quite concerning, but what is majorly concerning is male yolk, aka vitellogenin in males. Males should not be able to produce vitellogenin at all, seeing as how in the control site it doesn't even pass 2 milligrams over milliliters. However, there is a clear elevation that is concerning. It is at 300 milligrams at the highest, and lowest is at 100 milligrams over milliliters, which is concerning because vitellogenin is supposed to be silent. Now, males have been producing more vitellogenin, and this could be concerned by androgen. Now, androgen is important for male development reproduction. Now, in a high BPA, it can elevate androgen, however, it can also change reproductive behavior. Now, looking at androgen in the BPA site, looking at the control, the nanograms over milliliters, it's around 30. However, at the contaminated site, is elevated, which is quite concerning. However, in females, you can see that androgen in the control site is minimal. However, in the site, it's even more minimal, meaning it's being decreased, meaning that these fish are being affected by BPA. Now, a quick summary is that there is a BPA effect at the contaminated site, which is negatively affecting female ovaries and male gonads. Ovaries are enlarged, while the male gonads are decreasing. Now, BPA is negatively affected by Atlantic croakers because of the reproduction period. Vitellogenin should not be produced, and androgen is being increased in males because of said BPA. Now, looking at which is also a clear sign that BPA has been affecting this, is because estrogen is decreased in females, showing that the females are bioaccumulating more estrogen. Is increased in vitellogenin is another clear sign, as I've stated, that it is negatively affecting the Atlantic croaker.